The sun was setting over Crestwood, casting a soft orange hue across the quiet suburban neighborhood. Every house looked picture-perfect, manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and white picket fences. Inside house number 72, Darius Coleman sat in front of his laptop by the window. The glow from the screen lit up his face, early 30s, black, sharp eyes, and a quiet intensity. He wore a gray t-shirt and joggers, simple and clean, just like his life. Darius was a freelance software engineer, working remotely, keeping to himself. He didn't throw parties. He didn't talk to neighbors. He watered his plants, kept his Wi-Fi secure, and minded his business. He frowned. The internet was slow again. He hit F5, nothing. The page kept loading forever. With a few quick keystrokes, he launched a speed test, 8 Mbps download. That wasn't right, it should have been over 200. He opened up his router's admin panel, scanning for connected devices. That's when he saw it. A name he didn't recognize. Crestwood IO1. What the hell? He muttered, leaning closer. He reset the router, changed the password, and locked out all unfamiliar devices. It was a routine task, nothing new for someone in his field, but something about it felt off. He stepped outside to walk it off. The air was cool, crisp, the faint scent of freshly cut grass lingering. His phone in one hand, he circled around his yard, checking his network status. He didn't know it, but from the window across the street, someone was watching. Melanie Foster, 58, with short blonde hair and a stiff posture, stood behind lace curtains with a pair of binoculars. Her eyes followed every move Darius made. She narrowed them. Within minutes, she picked up her landline and dialed. Nice 11. Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious man. He's been pacing around outside. I think he might be up to something illegal. 5 minutes later, 2 police cruisers rolled up and parked in front of Darius's house. Flashlights shone through the door as an officer knocked hard. Darius opened it, confused, shielding his eyes from the light. Can I help you? We got a call about suspicious behavior, one officer said, his voice firm. What were you doing outside? I was fixing my Wi-Fi, Darius said slowly, glancing across the street. Melanie stood in her window, arms crossed, staring like she already had her verdict. Darius stepped back and opened the door wider. "Want to come in? You can check for yourself." Inside, he pointed to his router, pulling up the admin interface again. "This device showed up, Crestwood IO1. It's not mine. I changed the password right after." The 2 officers exchanged a look. "Anyone else in the neighborhood you think might be using your network?" one asked. "I live alone," Darius said. "I don't give out my password. I work in cybersecurity. I know what's on my network." They didn't say much after that. They thanked him for his cooperation and left, but Darius could still feel their suspicion. He watched them drive away. Then he looked at Melanie, still standing there, still watching. That night, his house was silent except for the faint hum of electronics. Darius sat back down, now curious, now bothered. He dug deeper. He exported the router logs from the past 3 weeks. Long lists of strange MAC addresses filled his screen, devices he didn't recognize. Some appeared almost every night. He cross-referenced those with the data logs from his home security system and froze. Someone in the neighborhood was accessing his cameras. His heart pounded. He scanned for internal IP addresses on the local subnet and mapped their physical locations. One dot blinked red. The signal was coming from Melanie Foster's house. The next morning, Darius went straight to the police station. He met with Detective Navarro, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who had the look of someone who missed nothing. Darius laid everything out: logs, timestamps, traffic analysis, everything. Navarro studied the files quietly. So this Crestwood IO1 device has been connecting to multiple houses and their cameras. Darius nodded. At least 3 other homes. I'm not sure how deep this goes, but someone's watching us, and the source of the traffic is coming from Melanie Foster's house. Navarro's jaw tightened. We'll open an investigation. Meanwhile, across the street, behind a locked attic door in Melanie's house, a small server hummed quietly. Red LED lights blinked in rhythm. An external hard drive recorded live feeds from at least 5 different homes. Then came the sound of footsteps. The attic door creaked open. "Brandon?" Melanie's voice floated up from downstairs. "Are you messing with that computer again?" There was no response. Detective Navarro stood in the middle of the precinct's cybercrime division, flipping through the printed logs Darius had handed him. The room buzzed with quiet urgency. Analysts tapping on keyboards, screens showing scrolling lines of code and IP addresses lighting up over digital maps. Darius sat across the desk, watching the detective's face for a hint of reaction. "This isn't just piggybacking off someone's Wi-Fi," Navarro finally said. "This is surveillance, targeted, coordinated." Darius leaned forward. "I told you someone's running a digital dragnet, not just on me, on this entire block." Navarro nodded once, then stood. "Let's take a ride." The two men climbed into an unmarked cruiser. As they pulled up to the Crestwood neighborhood, Navarro's eyes swept across the uniform houses, the same blinds, the same driveways, the same silence. He had worked narcotics, gang cases, even homicides. But there was something particularly sinister about this kind of crime. Something that happened behind closed curtains, cloaked in routers and signal hops, while the neighborhood watered their lawns. He cross-referenced those with the data logs from his home security system and froze. A stream of data was being sent from his security cameras, not to his cloud storage, not to his secure backup, but somewhere else. Somewhere nearby. Someone in the neighborhood was accessing his cameras. His heart pounded. He scanned for internal IP addresses on the local subnet and mapped their physical locations. One dot blinked red. The signal was coming from Melanie Foster's house. The next morning, Darius went straight to the police station. He met with Detective Navarro, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who had the look of someone who missed nothing. Darius laid everything out: logs, timestamps, traffic analysis, everything. Navarro studied the files quietly. So this Crestwood ISO-1 device has been connecting to multiple houses and their cameras. Darius nodded. At least 3 other homes. "I'm not sure how deep this goes, but someone's watching us, and the source of the traffic is coming from Melanie Foster's house." Navarro's jaw tightened. "We'll open an investigation." Meanwhile, across the street, behind a locked attic door in Melanie's house, a small server hummed quietly. Red LED lights blinked in rhythm. An external hard drive recorded live feeds from at least 5 different homes. Then came the sound of footsteps. The attic door creaked open. "Brandon?" Melanie's voice floated up from downstairs. "Are you messing with that computer again?" There was no response. Detective Navarro stood in the middle of the precinct's cybercrime division, flipping through the printed logs Darius had handed him. The room buzzed with quiet urgency. Analysts tapping on keyboards, screens showing scrolling lines of code and IP addresses lighting up over digital maps. Darius sat across the desk, watching the detective's face for a hint of reaction. "This isn't just piggybacking off someone's Wi-Fi," Navarro finally said. "This is surveillance, targeted, coordinated." Darius leaned forward. "I told you someone's running a digital dragnet, not just on me, on this entire block." Navarro nodded once, then stood. "Let's take a ride." The two men climbed into an unmarked cruiser. As they pulled up to the Crestwood neighborhood, Navarro's eyes swept across the uniform houses, the same blinds, the same driveways, the same silence. He had worked narcotics, gang cases, even homicides. But there was something particularly sinister about this kind of crime. Something that happened behind closed curtains, cloaked in routers and signal hops, while the neighborhood watered their lawns. They parked discreetly across from Melanie Foster's house. "She's not the type to set up a surveillance grid," Navarro muttered, watching Melanie tending to her rose bushes in the front yard. Darius shook his head. "No, but someone in that house is." Navarro reached for his radio. "Dispatch, run a background check on residents of 144 Crestwood Drive. Any recent tech purchases too. Servers, cameras, routers." There was a pause. Then the voice crackled back. "Resident includes Brandon Foster, age 23, moved in 6 months ago. Melanie's grandson." Darius turned his head sharply. "Brandon." Navarro narrowed his eyes. "We're paying him a visit." The detective walked up to the door. Melanie answered, wiping her gardening gloves on a towel. "Oh, officer, is something wrong?" she asked, that tight smile spreading across her face. "We'd like to speak with Brandon Foster," Navarro said. "Is he home?" She hesitated. "He's upstairs, I think, studying. What's this about?" "Just a few questions." Melanie's smile flickered. "He's a good boy, just quiet, works with computers." Navarro's gaze didn't waver. "That's exactly what I want to talk to him about." Moments later, Brandon Foster stood in the living room, arms crossed, jaw set. He had the cocky, defensive posture of a young man used to being smarter than everyone else in the room. "What's this about?" he said flatly. "Are you running a server out of this house, Brandon?" Navarro asked. "Something that's been connecting to multiple homes in this neighborhood?" Brandon snorted. "It's not illegal to run a server." "No, but intercepting security camera feeds and spoofing devices across a private network is," Navarro said. "Crestwood Eyes L1 ring a bell?" Brandon's smirk vanished. His throat bobbed slightly. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Navarro pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. The logs Darius compiled appeared, along with device IDs and connection timestamps. "These addresses, they all trace back to this house, your devices. We already have a warrant coming in to seize your server equipment." Melanie looked back and forth between them, confused. "Brandon, what is he saying?" Brandon opened his mouth, then closed it. He stared at the floor, silent. "Brandon," Darius said quietly, stepping forward. "You hacked into our homes, you watched people. You saw things that didn't belong to you. Why?" Brandon's jaw clenched. "I didn't hurt anyone, I was just curious, bored. It started out as a joke." Melanie gasped. "You did what?" He finally exploded. "You're also paranoid. Always acting like I'm some deadbeat, so I proved I could do something none of you even noticed." Navarro took a slow step closer. "What else have you accessed?" Brandon hesitated. Navarro's voice dropped. "Answer me." "I had feeds from 5 houses," Brandon said. "Yours, hers, the Andersons, and 2 others. That's it. I didn't sell anything. I didn't post anything." "Yet," Navarro said sharply. Melanie turned away, stunned. Her face went pale as her world began to collapse. Her assumption that she was the victim, the idea that Darius had been a threat, all of it crumbling. Darius stood still, watching her. There was no anger in his eyes, only a kind of exhausted understanding. Later that evening, Brandon was placed in custody and escorted out in handcuffs. Melanie sat on her porch, head in her hands, not speaking a word. Navarro turned to Darius. "You kept digging when others would have let it go. You trusted the data over bias. That saved people." Darius gave a faint smile, more sad than triumphant. "Sometimes the truth doesn't knock, you have to chase it through a signal." The 2 men stood in silence as the cruiser drove away, carrying Brandon into the deepening night. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Police cars don't go unnoticed in Crestwood, especially when someone's grandson is hauled away in cuffs. By morning, the community Facebook group was flooded with questions. What happened at Melanie's house? Did someone break in? Why was Darius with the police again? But Darius didn't answer any of them. He sat on his back porch, legs stretched out, coffee in hand, watching the wind pass through the trees. The quiet felt different now. Not peaceful, just heavy. The kind of silence that settles after a storm, but before the cleanup begins. He hadn't slept much. Not because of fear, but because the whole thing left a bad taste in his mouth. He hadn't done anything wrong. Yet he had still been the one interrogated, searched, watched, assumed guilty. And now the people who avoided eye contact with him for months were suddenly offering waves and smiles from across the street, as if their doubt had simply vanished overnight, replaced with awkward guilt. Melanie hadn't come outside all morning. He didn't expect her to. That afternoon, Navarro returned with a sealed envelope and a tired look in his eyes. He handed it to Darius without a word. Inside were printed reports, an official summary of the investigation. Brandon had been monitoring the neighborhood for at least 6 months. He'd accessed personal files, security feeds, even voice recordings, all from a server tucked away in an attic full of dust and wires. He hadn't just been curious, he had been methodical. FBI cybercrime is taking it from here, Navarro said. There may be more victims outside this block. Darius exhaled slowly. So he's going away for real. Navarro nodded. He will. They stood in silence again, as if the story hadn't ended, just paused. Then the detective added almost like an afterthought. You know, you were right. About everything. Most people would have reset their router and moved on. You saw the pattern. Darius gave a tired shrug. Patterns are what I do. I see them everywhere. I just didn't think I'd be part of one. Navarro looked down, then said softly, "Neither did I." Later that evening, there was a soft knock at his door. When Darius opened it, Melanie stood there, her hands folded tightly, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something deeper, shame. "I came to say, I'm sorry," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Darius didn't respond. "I judged you. I assumed things that weren't true. I thought I was protecting this neighborhood," she continued. "But it turns out I was looking in the wrong direction the whole time." He looked at her, this woman who had called the police on him simply for existing in his own yard, and saw not a monster, not even a villain, just someone scared, misguided, and now broken by truth. "I appreciate your apology," Darius finally said. "But this wasn't just about you or me. It's about what happens when fear replaces facts, when assumptions feel more comfortable than questions." Melanie nodded slowly. "I know, and I'll have to live with that." As she turned to leave, he stopped her. "Hey." She looked back. "Next time, if you think something's wrong, just knock. I'm a neighbor, not a threat." She gave the smallest of smiles. "Okay." When she left, Darius stood at his door, the weight on his chest just a little lighter. That night, he wrote a blog post. Not one about code or network security, but about trust, perception, and vigilance. He didn't name names. He didn't shame anyone. He simply told a story, one where the wrong man was blamed, and the real threat hid behind a screen. The post went viral. By the next morning, his inbox was flooded. Not with job offers or tech questions, but with stories. From others who had been profiled, misjudged, watched with suspicion in neighborhoods they called home. People who saw themselves in him. For the first time in a long time, Darius didn't feel invisible or alone. Crestwood changed after that. Slowly, neighbors talked more, not just surface stuff, real conversations. They asked questions before jumping to conclusions, and every time someone walked past his house, they looked a little longer, not with fear, but with recognition. Because sometimes it takes a breach, not just of privacy, but of comfort, for people to finally see what's really happening behind their own walls. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of another morning, Darius Coleman sipped his coffee, router secure, eyes open, heart steady. The signal was clear now, and he was still watching just in case no one else would. A week passed. Crestwood returned to its usual rhythms. Lawnmowers humming in the distance, sprinklers ticking in the early mornings, and delivery vans rolling down the streets with clockwork precision. But for Darius, something hadn't settled. Not really. He kept checking his router logs out of habit. The data flow was clean, secure, but every time he scanned the network, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. One evening, while reviewing the exported logs from the days before Brandon's arrest, he noticed a line he hadn't seen before. A MAC address. It wasn't Brandon's. It had pinged his router exactly 20 minutes after Brandon's server was shut down. That wasn't possible, unless someone else had access. His fingers froze over the keyboard. Then he opened the traffic monitoring tool again, ran a packet trace, and filtered for external attempts at handshake connections over encrypted ports. 3 pings, all from a separate location across the neighborhood. He pulled up the map. It wasn't Melanie's house. It was the Andersons, the elderly couple who barely used email, who still paid bills with checks. Darius knew them, said hello every now and then. They were kind, harmless, but someone inside their network had tried to reconnect to his camera stream. Darius stood up from his desk, pulse rising. He walked to the window and looked down the block. The Andersons' porch light was off, curtains drawn, their car still parked in the same spot. Something didn't fit. He sent the logs to Navarro with a short message. "We missed someone." An hour later, Navarro called. "I saw it," he said. "There's a second device, encrypted traffic. Brandon's server didn't account for this." Darius sat down. He wasn't working alone. "Looks that way." Navarro sighed. "I'll need to get another warrant. This thing just got bigger." A strange silence hung between them. Then Navarro added, "Thanks for staying paranoid." Darius hung up, but he didn't feel satisfied. He stared at his screen again, at the blinking cursor, at the connection logs, and then a new ping. Live. Right now. He opened the terminal. It was trying to establish a tunnel through port 443. Someone was watching again. Real time. Darius reacted instinctively. He slammed the connection shut, encrypted his network on the fly, rotated the MAC of his router, and deployed a packet trap. Within seconds, the attacker bit. They didn't just try to reconnect. They sent data back. But not to the Andersons. The packet came from a proxy in another state, bounced off a relay in Maryland. Whoever was behind this knew what they were doing. This wasn't some bored kid anymore. This was structured, professional, possibly organized. Darius's breath caught in his throat. He downloaded the packet and parsed the data. There was a string embedded inside. Encrypted. He cracked it in 30 seconds. It wasn't a virus. It was a message. "Stop looking." His fingers froze. Then his eyes narrowed. He reached for his second laptop, the one completely offline. He booted up a secure OS, loaded the raw files, and began tracing the packet headers. If they wanted him to stop, that meant he was close. Too close. Somewhere beyond Crestwood, beyond Brandon Foster, something larger was hiding behind these proxy walls. Something that had eyes on more than just a few homes. And they had just blinked. Darius leaned back in his chair, staring at the message. He smirked. "You blinked first." He opened a blank text editor and began typing a new log, a new trace, a new hunt. This wasn't over. Not even close. The cursor blinked back at him, steady and patient. Darius stared at the decrypted message again. "Stop looking." A direct threat, short, cold, confident. But whoever sent it didn't know Darius Coleman very well. He wasn't built to stop. He was built to dig. The packet had come through a proxy node in Maryland. He focused on that relay first, using deep packet inspection to trace the chain upstream. Whoever masked it didn't expect a seasoned penetration tester to be on the receiving end. The tunnel wasn't perfect. He found a crack, a DNS leak. It revealed a secondary IP, dormant, inactive, but tied to a private server block registered under an innocuous name, Greylock Industrial Holdings. A quick Hoy's lookup confirmed what he already suspected. The company was fake. Shell Corp, no employees, no revenue. But the server block was real, and it wasn't just for hosting. It was connected to a data aggregation node, the kind used for large-scale collection, filtering, and real-time behavioral analysis. Darius sat back, mind racing. This wasn't a lone hacker. This was infrastructure. Industrial level. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He typed one word into his trace query. Crestwood. 17 hits. All within a 10-mile radius. Security cameras, smart thermostats, doorbells, phones, even baby monitors. All compromised. Brandon hadn't created this system. He'd piggybacked onto it. The kid was just a user. An arrogant little parasite riding the back of something massive. And Darius had just stepped on its tail. Outside, a car rolled slowly down his street. Black, unmarked, windows tinted darker than legally allowed. He noticed it but didn't react. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out his burner phone and dialed Navarro directly. "I need to meet," he said. "When?" the detective asked. "Now." 10 minutes later, they sat in Navarro's office. The detective listened silently as Darius laid it all out. The proxy trace, the corporate front, the scale of the surveillance. "This is bigger than state level," Darius said. "This is coordinated." Navarro's jaw clenched. "You're saying there's a network harvesting data from people's devices? From our own homes?" "Yes, and Brandon got caught playing with the front end of it." "Jesus!" Darius leaned in. "You need a cyber task force, federal level. I've got the leads, you've got the badge." Navarro stood and grabbed his phone. "We're going to need a room." Within the hour, agents from the Department of Cybercrime and Digital Intelligence arrived. Laptops opened, screens lit up. Darius plugged in his drive and walked them through his findings. By midnight, a team was scanning infrastructure across the state. By morning, they had a name. Project Glassfield, a rogue surveillance initiative, supposedly shut down 2 years ago after an internal leak. But someone had kept the back end alive, repurposed it, distributed it across friendly civilian networks, and disguised it as malware-resistant home security software. It was buried in firmware updates, hidden in smart home integrations, silent, efficient, illegal. And now it was watching hundreds of neighborhoods. Crestwood was just a test run. "You want to know the scariest part?" he added. "What?" "They're not the only ones doing it." Navarro went quiet. "I've seen other patterns," Darius continued. "Different signatures, different architectures, but same goal. Real-time data, behavior tracking, passive surveillance, always watching." The detective shook his head. "What kind of world are we building, man?" Darius didn't answer. He didn't need to, because he already knew. It was a world where privacy was optional, where your refrigerator might report your habits, where your child's toy could be a listening device. But now someone was watching them back. He looked at the server schematic again, then at the agents moving urgently across the room. Then he smiled to himself. The game had changed, and he was done playing defense. 3 days after the initial takedown, most of the local Glassfield nodes had been disabled. Arrests were made in 3 states, seizures of servers, routers, even smart refrigerators that had been reprogrammed to act as low-key signal repeaters. But one thing was still missing: the operator, the architect behind the active nodes, the one who had sent the message. Stop looking. Darius hadn't stopped. He couldn't. Buried deep in the firmware of a hijacked smart thermostat from the Andersons' house, he found something the task force had missed. A digital signature buried in raw hexadecimal code. A tag. Yuriwan Alpha. Darius isolated it, ran it through a local parser, then cross-referenced known digital watermark styles from former government cybersecurity programs. Only one matched. A classified initiative from 10 years ago, canceled quietly after a whistleblower leaked a single name to the press. Declan Maris, a former DARPA contractor, encryption specialist, disappeared 5 years ago, last seen in Utah under a different name. Rumors said he'd gone underground. Theories said he'd died. But Darius had just found his ghost, still coding, still watching. He took the data to Navarro. "This guy's a phantom," Navarro said. "No address, no credit history, just one bounced bank transaction from a gas station near Denver. That's it." "Then I'll find him," Darius replied. Navarro raised an eyebrow. "You're not a cop." "No," Darius said, "I'm better." A day later, Darius boarded a train west using cash, no electronics. The feds were still analyzing local data while he went after the route, off-grid. He traced Maris through digital footprints so small they looked like noise. A glitched security feed here, a malformed packet from a library server in Boulder, a vending machine that briefly connected to a signal repeater in a parking garage. All led to the same location, cabin in the Rockies near nothing. No roads in, only trail. It took him 5 hours of hiking through rough forest. The sun had started to drop behind the peaks when he saw it, a small, steel-sided building with a solar array on the roof. No windows. One antenna pointed to the sky. It took him 5 hours of hiking through rough forest. The sun had started to drop behind the peaks when he saw it, a small, steel-sided building with a solar array on the roof. No windows. One antenna pointed to the sky. Darius approached slowly, cautiously, slipping on gloves as he reached the door. It was unlocked. Inside, darkness. Then, a voice. Flat, modulated. "You made it." A flicker. Screens lit up one by one, surrounding him in a half-circle. Each displayed a different camera feed. Cities, homes, streets, office buildings. "You left your door open," Darius said. The voice responded. "You tracked the signature. Good, you're faster than I thought." "I'm not here to play chess." A screen in the center blinked. A live feed. Declan Maris appeared, gray hoodie, long beard, cold eyes. Not quite surprised. "You really think you can stop it?" Maris asked. Glassfield is just one branch. There are 10 more, each with different operators, different functions: surveillance, manipulation, behavioral engineering. Darius stared at him. And you just sit here and watch? I predict, Maris said. I model behavior, I warn governments. My systems prevented 2 terror attacks last year. And how many children did you watch sleep? Darius snapped. Maris didn't flinch. Privacy is dead. I'm just the one honest enough to admit it. Darius stepped forward. Then it's time to bury your honesty. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a device, one he'd been building for weeks, a custom pulse rig, coded to deliver a tailored electromagnetic burst through local circuitry, enough to fry every board in a 10-meter radius. Maris's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't. Darius didn't answer. He pressed the switch. The lights blew out, screens cracked. A low hum rose, then silence. Darkness. Only the wind outside. The surveillance cathedral had fallen, and Darius stood alone in the ashes. But he knew it wasn't the end, because in the wreckage of that cabin, beneath the smoldering silicon, he had taken something else. A drive, encrypted, and he would break it, because this war wasn't over. It had just gone dark.